playing songs. Let's take a second and play a few demo songs. Take the demo disc that came with your XP50 and insert it into the disk drive. The drive automatically loads the disk directory when you insert a disk, so wait a few seconds until the disk drive light goes out. There are two methods that can be used to play songs with the XP50: direct from disk playback and loading a song into internal memory. The direct from disk playback method allows you to play back songs with no load time. This is extremely useful for live performance. Press the sequencer button. The screen should indicate Song 0 Internal Song. Make sure that the cursor is located under the song number. If it's not, use the left cursor button to get it there. Now, press the increment button or turn the dial clockwise to select the desired song on the disk. The song name and number will blink to indicate that it hasn't yet been selected. Now, you can press the Stop Play button to play that song. Press it again to stop the song. The M equals at the bottom of the screen indicates the current measure. The first four measures of each demo song are typically used for sound setup and therefore don't make any sound. To stop the song, press the Stop Play button again. Loading a song. If you load a song into internal memory, you can make changes to it. So, let's load a song. First, press the disk button. Now press 2 to select Load. Then press 1 to select Song. Now turn the alpha dial to look at all the different songs on the disk. Choose the song that you want, and then press Enter. That will load it into internal memory. After the XP has finished loading the song, the screen will display the name of the song that you just loaded. Press Stop Play to play back the song. When the song is stopped, you can use the backward and forward buttons to rewind and fast forward, just like when you're working with a tape recorder. Use the cursor buttons to select M equals in the display and choose the measure that you want to play back from, either using the alpha dial or entering with numbers. Now you can press Stop Play again and play back from that location. Recording basics. When you record music into the sequencer of the XP, you can choose whether to record in a linear or loop record mode. In linear mode, it's much like recording to tape, because everything records in real time as you play it. With loop recording, you can choose a section of music to repeat continuously as you add new musical ideas. Whether in linear or loop recording, you can determine whether you want to do replace recording, which erases any previously recorded information in the track, or you can do mix recording, which will add or overdub any new music. Replace recording is most useful when putting single parts onto their own tracks. Mix recording works very well for building a groove by adding parts on top of one another. Loop recording. Let's experiment with loop recording. Here's a simple approach for creating a loop. Select a performance to use for your instruments. I'll choose preset A number 12 called Pop Set 1. This is a performance with different instruments assigned to each part. I'll start by choosing part 10, which is my rhythm part. I can do this very easily by using my left and right cursor buttons. Notice that these cursor buttons move through the various parts of my performance setup. Press the sequencer button, then press Record. Now I can choose the record mode, which I'll set to mix so I can add parts without stopping the sequence. Then I'll set a loop length of 4 bars, which means that it'll keep playing the same 4 measures over and over so I can add to them. Now, press the cursor down button 1 time to get to the Input Quantize function. Input Quantize will auto-correct timing of the notes, so you can determine the timing value, 30-second notes, 8th note triplets, whatever, as well as the actual strength of the quantizing. So you can choose to correct the timing to 16th notes, but at a strength of, say, 43%, which will move anything you play 43% closer to the nearest 16th note position. So now I hit cursor up once, and I'm back at my record window. I'll hold Shift and hit metronome to turn my metronome on. And now when I hit play, I have 1 bar of count in, then my loop begins. So, here we go. Now I'll turn off my metronome because I'd rather listen to my own drum parts alone. So I'll hold Shift and turn the metronome off. Now, without stopping the loop, I can hold Performance and press Patch to get me into what's called the part play mode. This is where I can select whatever other parts I wish to play by simply pressing the left and right cursor buttons. So now, I'll choose part 2, which is a bass part, and then I'll record a bass line. But before I do that, I'll press Sequencer and slow my tempo a bit. This is great because now I can play in parts at whatever tempo is comfortable for me. So now I can record my bass part. But before I do that, if I want to try out an idea, I can hold down the record button and audition my part, like this. Throw it down an octave. Okay, great. Now, so I know what I want to play, so here we go. Okay, so here's my bass part. Now I can add a piano part, again, in part play mode by simply cursoring to, at this point, part 1. So now I can go in and actually move my tempo back to where I initially intended the groove to be. Notice that I've done all of this without ever stopping the loop. Before we move on, pause the video and take some time to try this for yourself. Setting playback loop length. So now I've got this simple 4-bar loop. Okay, first I'm going to set the playback loop length. Because I've created a 4-bar loop in record mode, I'm going to go and set the playback loop length to 4 bars as well. However, I could make it a different length if I wanted to hear a shorter or longer section of the music. So to set the loop length, I'm going to press Sequencer, then press the Edit button, make sure the edit light is on, and then select Loop in the Edit grid. So I look across, there it is. Now I'm going to set my loop from measure 1, beat 1, through measure 5, beat 1. Trying different sounds. Now I can play my loop and try out different sounds. Remember, this is a digital sequence, so only the note information has been recorded, which means that I can change the instruments without affecting the actual performance. So I press Performance and Patch together, and I enter the part play mode. Again, just like when I was recording, I can use the left and right cursor buttons to select various parts. Then try different patches, either by turning the dial, stepping through with increment-decrement, or typing in the numbers from the 10 keypad, like this. Copying a track to a pattern. The XP50 can have 100 patterns per song. This is important because it allows you to create different parts of your song in any order and then piece them together. A pattern can be any length and any complexity. In other words, a pattern can be a short drum fill or piano riff, or it can be a complete intro or chorus of a tune. A pattern is a single track with up to 16 MIDI channels, so you can create a complex sequence in a linear track, then copy it to a pattern to use it as a building block for your song. So let's copy the linear track we just made into a pattern track. First, press Sequencer to make sure you're in the sequencer mode. Then press Edit. Now select Track Edit from the Edit grid and make sure that the cursor is under Type. Scroll to 03 Copy under Type, then cursor once to the right under Source. We want the source to be all the tracks from our sequence, so set the source to Track All. Now, cursor right one more time to Dest or Destination. Select pattern 001, which will copy everything to pattern number 1. While we're in this Edit menu, notice that if you cursor right again, you can also determine how many measures to copy, how many times you want to copy it, and so on. You can even determine certain channels, so if you want to copy only a drum part from channel 10 or whatever. So now, simply press Enter, and your groove will be copied into pattern number 1. That's easy enough, and here's my groove, now in pattern mode. Recording in pattern mode. Now we know how to do loop recording and how to copy tracks from a linear sequence into the pattern mode. You can also record music as a pattern directly in pattern mode. It works exactly the same as we did in linear mode, but it's unique because you can quickly switch around from pattern to pattern and hear your ideas. So I'll record a short drum fill into pattern 2. I'll press record, then start my metronome, then press play to begin recording. There it is, nothing fancy, but it'll work for this demonstration. Now, I have this short drum fill in pattern 2, and my groove in pattern 1. I can switch easily between them, and remember, I can have up to 100 patterns in a single song. Building a linear song from patterns. A great feature of the XP50 is the fact that you can create a song by using patterns as building blocks. If you've ever worked with a drum machine, you've probably done this before. One thing that's really nice about creating songs this way is that your song is actually nothing more than a set of pointers to the patterns that you want. This means that you can get the sections of your song together as basic patterns, then create a song that addresses them. Meanwhile, if you make changes to your patterns, your song will always reflect the newest version of your music. That way you can quickly hear how your patterns flow together as they evolve. So let me show you how to do this. First, press M-scope, which will take you into microscope mode. Notice that the display now shows the measure, beat, and tick of your current position. There are 96 ticks or subdivisions to every beat. So for now, leave it at 1-1-000. This means it's at measure 1, beat 1, and 0 ticks. Then turn the edit light on. In microscope mode, you can create and edit single events. In this case, we'll create some pattern pointers. So look down below the edit button and find where it says microscope, then follow that across to where it says create, which is the first function in the row. Then press the button for create. Now you can select what you want to create, which in this case is a pattern. But remember, this is nothing more than a pointer or address to the pattern. So turn the dial until you see pattern, then hit enter. Now you'll see a screen that says the pattern number, which you can change by turning the dial or typing it in on the keypad. Also, notice in the right of the screen it tells where the pattern ends. This is handy because you'll know where to place your next pattern so they don't overlap, unless of course you want them to. So now hit the sequencer button and press play, and you'll hear your pattern play back as the first step in your song. To insert more patterns into your song, or to move them around or whatever, do exactly the same edit procedure that we just did. RPS, making an RPS set. Now, let's make an RPS or real-time phrase sequencing set. This means that you can assign patterns to be triggered by simply hitting various keys. To get to the RPS setup menu, press Sequencer, and make sure you've selected 00 internal song. Then press Edit. Now look in the Edit grid and select RPS. You should get a screen that looks like this: Phrase Sequence, Trigger Quantize, Real. By selecting a trigger quantize value, you can decide whether you'll trigger patterns immediately when you hit a key, or whether the triggers will lock to the next beat clock or the next measure. So I'll leave it set to real for now. Cursor down one time and you'll find the sequence set display. Notice that as you strike various keys, the name of each key appears in the upper left of the display. In this mode, you can assign a specific pattern to play with each key. So I'll hit this key and assign pattern 1 by selecting 001 where it says play pattern. And I'll assign this key to play pattern 2. Also, I'll assign this key to play pattern 1, but I'll change the playback mode to loop 2. Playback modes work like this. Loop 1 will continuously loop the pattern until the key is released. Then it stops. Loop 2 will play the pattern continuously once the key is struck. To stop that pattern, then strike the key again. And the third choice for playback mode is once, which will play the pattern one time. I'm going to set this bottom key to be a stop key. I do this by choosing play pattern and then scrolling to the left with the alpha dial. This will stop any patterns that are playing by simply pressing one key. So now I've set up a simple RPS set. I'll press Sequencer to exit edit mode. And now notice a couple things. First of all, my keyboard is still completely active. Okay? This is the part play mode that we learned earlier. But when I turn on RPS, my keyboard is still completely active, except where I've assigned keys to trigger patterns. So I can trigger a pattern and play along. I'll cover some interesting RPS applications later on in this video. For now, let's move on to sequence editing. Editing sequences. The XP50 Sequencer is very powerful for editing your compositions. You can work on music in a couple different ways, namely track editing or microscope editing. Track editing. Let's first look at track editing. With track editing, you can work on very large or very small amounts of music, depending on the parameters that you define. So let's check it out. First, press the sequencer button. Make sure that the display reads 00 internal song. If it doesn't, move the cursor under the song number, turn the dial to select 00 internal song, and then press the enter button. Now turn on the edit light and look below it where it says sequencer. Follow that row across until you find Track Edit, which is actually the first function in the row. So press the button above Track Edit. Your display should say Track Edit, type 01, erase, etc. Now make sure that the cursor is under 01 and turn the dial to see all the possible edit functions that you have to choose from. Erase, delete, copy, insert, transpose, change velocity, change channel, change gate time, merge, extract, shift, thin, and exchange. Now, rather than going in depth into every single function, let's go through the first function, erase, and look at how much control there is over every facet of editing. So, scroll back to 01 erase, and remember as we look at these functions that we'll be looking at erase for now, but these parameters work the same for all the various functions that we just saw. So now hit the right cursor button once and move the cursor under Target. This lets you select what you want to edit. Notice that you can choose all tracks or any individual track, or track T, that's the tempo track, or any of the 100 patterns that are in your song. Now hit the right cursor button again to where it says Measure. This lets you determine how much or how little of the music you want to edit. You can choose an edit range like measures 27 for 8 measures or whatever. So if you want to erase only a particular section, you can do that easily. Now cursor over to Status. This is where you select what you actually want to edit in the particular track and region that you've chosen. In other words, do you want to erase everything, which is Status All, or do you want to erase only notes or aftertouch or controllers or program changes? Remember, this works the same for the other edit functions like transposition, changing MIDI channels, and so on. Cursor right one more time. This is where you select the channel you want to edit. Remember, you've already selected the tracker pattern, but a tracker pattern can have up to 16 MIDI channels in it. So you still want to determine which channel you're editing. Once you set all these parameters to what you want, then press Enter. And remember that you have an undo button. So if you execute an edit and then decide, oops, that's not what I meant to do, then you can undo the edit. That's a quick look at track editing. Microscope editing. Another very slick way to edit on the XP is called microscope editing. With microscope editing, you can literally see every single event on every channel on every track. So there's nothing in a song that you can't modify using microscope editing. To enter microscope mode, simply press M-scope. Now you can scroll through all the notes, controllers, and other messages on the track. Notice that there's a microscope edit row in the edit grid that lets you do things like create, erase, and move events. I'll record a quick musical line like this. Now, when I press microscope, I can see every note I just played. And if I want to change any note, I can do that too, like this. Once you've started feeling comfortable using the sequencer in your XP50, be sure to take some time to familiarize yourself with microscope mode, because it really is a very powerful musical tool. Real-time quantize preview. Another impressive feature of the XP is its ability to do real-time, non-destructive editing. One of the best uses for this is quantizing. Quantizing is a way of correcting the timing of notes. For example, if you choose to quantize to 16th notes, you will move every note to the closest 16th note position. That's called grid quantizing, because you're actually determining a grid of a certain resolution for the music to lock to. Because the XP50 lets you hear everything in real time as it's happening, you can edit much more easily. Now I'm going to make a very straight drum pattern to demonstrate the quantize functions. I won't go through this step by step since it's what we just learned when we talked about loop recording. So here goes. Okay, no Grammys for that one, but it'll suffice for experimenting with quantize. So now I'm going to go into my sequencer edit mode. To do this, I press sequencer, then turn the edit light on. Now I'm going to select quantize in the edit grid, which is a second button over from the left. In the quantize window, you'll see quantize written in the top left of the screen, then the settings for type, resolution, and strength. There are three types of quantizing in the XP50. Grid quantize, shuffle quantize, and groove quantize. Earlier I described grid quantizing as a way of locking notes down to a specific grid or resolution. By setting the grid quantize strength, you can determine how much correction is applied, anywhere from 0% to 100%. For instance, 16th notes at a strength of 67% will move all notes 67% closer to the nearest 16th note position. The second type of quantizing that the XP does is called shuffle quantizing. This is kind of difficult to describe in words. It's sort of a triplet feel rather than a straight duple meter feel. Rather than trying to describe it to you, let me show you how it works, and I think it'll make a lot more sense. To show you this, I'll use the straight drum groove that I recorded a minute ago. First, I'll set the quantize type to shuffle. Then I'll set the resolution to eighth notes, since the groove I'm using has an eighth note feel. Now don't worry about it if you're not sure which resolution to use, because you can try out different resolutions to decide what feels best. And I'm going to start by setting the shuffle rate to 50%, which is hard quantized right on the money with no shuffle feel at all. So now I press play and I hear my track. Notice that it's looping 2 bars of the groove. This is handy because now I can start making changes to the feel and hear how it affects my groove in real time. I'll start increasing the percentage of shuffle feel and then listen to how it affects the groove. Now notice that if I go too far and the feel starts getting weird, I can always scroll back to where it feels right. This lets me try out different percentages without worrying that it's going to mess up my track. So now here I've chosen a feel of 61%. Feels pretty good. But now maybe I'm listening and I think, yeah, this is cool, but I think I liked it better as a straight feel after all. So I hit stop and exit my edit mode, and now notice that I'm right back where I started. That's really great because I never actually changed the music in my track. All of the quantize experimenting that I did was completely non-destructive. So you're always free to play around with different quantizing options until you find the one that works best. That's a really musical function that's extremely uncommon. If you're still watching, hopefully that means that you've gotten some good info from this video. I hope it helps you get more out of your XP50. If you own other Roland products, you may want to check out some of the other Roland video owners manuals available from your Roland dealer. See ya.